Hi, welcome everyone. Today we have quite an interesting combination. On one hand, a rare car on our roads, and on the other hand, a very frequently asked question, does a big SUV with a big engine even make sense? And today, with the owner of this car, Christian, we'll be talking, among other things, about whether it makes sense, but also about whether expectations matched reality. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Christian and this is my X5M. I've been driving this car for a year. I've done 30,000 kilometers, and today I'll tell you what my expectations were for this car and what the reality has been like. I've already driven several cars. I had a Mercedes, of course an AMG, I had an RS, then an M4, and I actually traded that M4 for this X. Someone might ask if I'm a big BMW fan. Well, I like these cars, but I'm not a purist, and I won't say it's the brand I'll drive all the time. And if someone is wondering how it's possible that I traded an M4 competition for an X5M, honestly, I have to say I don't know how it happened. Well, I wrecked my M4 and I didn't know what I wanted to drive. I was thinking about the RS7, but then I saw this beautiful machine, this beautiful beast, and I just fell in love. The moment I saw it in person, I knew I was going to drive it. And it's been with me for over a year now. I saw it exactly as it is here. I'm not a big fan of ordering and waiting for cars, so it's just the way it was. And since it's fully loaded, nothing is missing. Interestingly, it might seem that such a big car would attract a lot of attention, especially in this color, but that's not the case. The M4 was much more popular on the road, a lot more people paid attention to it. As for this car, unfortunately, it just blends into the city, even though it's quite a big beast. When it comes to the differences between a regular X5, to be honest, there aren't that many. Of course, the body is beefed up and there are bigger wheels and there are M-package mirrors in carbon fiber. However, in everyday traffic, it's not something that generates that much excitement. For people on the streets, the M4 stood out much more. And even though this car is quite unassuming on the road, those 4 exhaust tips reveal that there's something more powerful under the hood. And I have to say, I think I like the rear of this car the most. It's the most muscular, big, especially in this black color. It makes an impression and definitely attracts the attention of those driving behind us. The badge is also black, so you can't really see it. You can only see that it's a competition, so if someone likes BMW, they already know it's a more powerful version. Although I think we live in Poland, so there are so many M badges stuck on different cars that the combination of these 4 exhaust tips, this badge, and the competition badge gives away that this is something with a V8 under the hood. As for that V8 I mentioned earlier, as you can see, it's quite unreliable because there's a pretty thick layer of dust on it. On this one, I only changed the oil. I change the oil every 10,000 kilometers. If I wanted to drive this car for a very short time, I would probably change the oil as BMW recommends, which is after about 30,000 kilometers. As for the power, it's 625 horsepower, 750 Nm. And I don't know why BMW made this a hybrid, because they basically just added an engine here. An electric one which has 12 horsepower and 200 Nm, but you don't feel it at all. Even on the displays, there's no information that it's running on electricity now. The only thing I can say for sure is that the start-stop system works much more effectively thanks to this electric motor, and that's all. But it added 120 kilos to the weight of this car after the facelift. As I said, it's a hybrid, so the question is, how much fuel does such a hybrid consume? And unfortunately, it's not 4 liters, it's not 14 liters either. It can burn 20 liters. In the city, on the road, it's 17 to 18 liters. And now, when I compare it to the M4 used to burn 13 to 14 liters. Here, this big brute, which has such high rolling resistance, unfortunately doesn't help with eco-driving. Despite this electric motor, which had to be reinforced here, that's just the way things are nowadays. The good news is that this car has an 80-liter fuel tank. So you visit the gas station often, but not as often as if it only had a 50-liter tank on a full tank. You can go about 400 to 500 kilometers, depending on how we drive and how much we drive in the city. Because this beast, well, it burns the most fuel in the city, in traffic jams. I have my own stations where the staff greets me right away, because they see me so often.
Hi, the partner of this episode is WeHizPL with a promotion called Cheaper Than the Cheapest. As I've mentioned many times in other videos, and as you may know yourself, on WeHiz you'll find cars at great prices, often the lowest on the market. But their idea of low prices goes even further now. You can get any car even cheaper. You go to the WeHizPL website or app, choose a car, and if you finalize and insure your chosen model online, that car will be an additional 3% cheaper. And that's without any negotiations. Do you like, for example, this new JQ5? The market price is, let's say, 109,900. So with a 3% discount, it will be 106,603 PLN, which means you keep over 3,000 PLN in your pocket. What if, by some miracle, you negotiate an even better price with the dealer? Then you can go to WeHizPL with the dealer's offer, and WeHizPL will finance the car for you. Another 3% cheaper than the lowest offer you managed to find. Why does it work? Because you get the whole package in one place. The car, financing, insurance, faster, simpler, fully online, and therefore cheaper. So next time you see a car price, remember one thing. WeHiz is cheaper than the cheapest. The link is in the description. Check it out.
Since it's a V8, let's listen to how it sounds.
I'll tell you, if something impressed you about this car, it definitely wasn't the sound.
Actually, the sound is cool, but only under load, because when it's idling, it doesn't sound as nice as it does when you're driving it, but we'll check that in a moment. When we're inside this car, what I like the most about it is the BMW build quality. Compared to Mercedes, well, Mercedes, sorry, but the quality there is much, much worse. Here, nothing creaks. When it comes to the M version, the only difference is that here we have the M badge. There's no information on the gauges. There's an animation when you start the car, the M logo appears, but it's not like in the M4 where you could immediately see that it's the M4 here. That's not the case. The interior is typical BMW, a large glass panel. I don't know if I completely like it, but it's not like I'm going to hate on it either. For sure, in my particular model, what I like the most is that there's quite a lot of carbon fiber here. There's no piano black here. The build quality, as I said before, is very, very good. I love this Alcantara headliner. The leather is also very nice. The seats are great. In the M4, I had those carbon bucket seats, which were definitely less comfortable, but they held you better in the corners. Here, these seats are focused on comfort. Of course, it also has massage, heating, and ventilation. What I don't like about this car is the seat ventilation. I think it doesn't work. I've already taken it in for service twice and asked if everything is really okay with it, because I don't feel it at all. They say that's how it works in BMW in these higher versions, that it won't blow air at us, but rather it will suck it in. I don't feel it. The funny thing is that you can both heat and cool the seats at the same time. The result is that I can really only feel that it's warm. As for the rest, it's quite a car. There's really a lot of space here, but Zakir Off will check that with the tall driver test in a moment. Both in the front and in the back, lots of storage compartments, lots of space. You sit very high in this car. Compared to the M4, at first I felt like I was on a bus in here. Now I've gotten used to looking bus drivers straight in the eye. Well, it's quite a tall car. The rest is pleasant, even the fact that there are no physical buttons for the air conditioning here. BMW solved it quite well on the screen. You can change these things quite quickly. I'm very curious what Zakir will say about the build quality and plastics, because I don't see any plastics here. But he'll give his opinion on what he thinks about it, and whether it's really as I say.
Time for the tall driver test. I want to pull the steering wheel as close as possible, though I don't have to. Because basically, combined with the seat, which is already at its lowest. But how is that? Well, okay, I'm positioned perfectly in relation to the steering wheel. Actually, I overdid it and I can push it in a bit more. Oh, now there's some extra space, such a big car. However, the seat adjustment is a bit disappointing because I'm looking at the road at the height of the rear view mirror, and I thought, just like Christian said a moment ago, that you sit high, but I thought it was an option. Turns out it's mandatory. Because here indeed the seat doesn't go any lower. As a result, my visibility will be slightly limited. Exactly, with this mirror. To see below the mirror, I'd have to bend down like this. Above my head, even with the sunroof here, there's still quite a bit of space left. And when it comes to the materials, there's really no need to tug on them. And touching it, you can see that everything here is really covered in leather. There's quite a bit of foam under the leather. Here we have carbon fiber trim with aluminum. Here there's a material that looks like some kind of diamond cut finish. Let's just say it's not that simple. It has these little triangles. It probably glows nicely at night. This part sticks out quite a bit. This one sticks out quite a bit. So if something is going to creak, it's right here. Aviance. And look, it moves quite noticeably, but it doesn't make any noise. Here too, there's quite a bit of movement, but it's quiet. The screen is quiet too. Ekran. It'll catch somewhere around here. Really, it is, just like you said. Door handles. All right, I got something off the door handle here, which is a bit odd because we won't be yanking on all of this every day. But the door handle, yes. You could pour concrete around the door handle to keep it from moving, but it is what it is. Anyway, I got some squeaking out of it. Listen, I'd be really surprised if it turned out I couldn't fit behind myself. And actually, I do fit. Okay? There's a lot of space under the seats, which is great for backseat passengers and provides extra room. You could still play around with this seat to lower it even more. There's still quite a bit of headroom left. And that's great news that there's a comparable amount of space both in the front and in the back. I see we have heated outer seats as well as 4-zone climate control, but the rear bench isn't adjustable, from what I can see. And that's quite strange because in this class of car, but at least the backrest angle is adjustable. No, it's not. Oh. So we've gone for sport, ladies and gentlemen, and let's stick with that.
Well, since it's a big car, let's move on to the practical aspect, which is the trunk. I rarely use it. I don't know why I bought this car, but never mind. What's cool about X is that we have this side panel that slides away. The trunk is very big. You can easily pack for 4 people here if you're going somewhere far. You can also fit a table because I had the chance to transport a table with this car. And what's really nice is that when you go to a store, you don't have to wonder if something will fit or not, because it definitely will. When you fold down the seats, there's a lot of space. It's also nice that you can sit on it, and if someone goes skiing or snowboarding, you can change your clothes here. I've heard that anglers also really like this tailgate because you can fish while sitting here. But seriously, the trunk is very, very spacious. Underneath here, there's also a space where I guess theoretically there should be a spare wheel, but there isn't one, and I'm not sure if it would even fit, but the space is quite large and you can pack some more things in here. There's also a net here that you can use to separate the trunk space from the back seats. As you can see, I've never unpacked it. Also, when it comes to other practical matters, I can't really say if this car is suitable for a family because there have never been any child seats here, etc., etc. Besides, I've only sat in the back seats maybe 3 times and maybe 5 times someone else has ridden there, so I still can't answer the question of why I bought this car. But interestingly, when I was buying this car, the salesman wanted to prepare for the conversation and said, "You definitely have kids and need a big car." I said, "I don't." So he looked for another idea and said, "Then you must carry a lot of stuff." I said, "Not really." So he finally asked, "Why do you want to buy this car?" And I said, "I don't know. I guess it's just because I simply like it. It's extremely different, and honestly, it's so ridiculous that I want to have it just so I can drive it around." And that was probably the only reason. But when it comes to things that make me laugh, there's this. We have this magic button here that makes the sunshade automatically go down. BMW did a great job for those who want to impress, as it truly stands out. But if I wanted to fold the front seats right now, I have to go over there and pull the lever because there's nothing here that would let me fold the seats from this position. But what's nice is that the rear bench is split and you can easily transport longer items just by opening this middle segment.
What were you expecting this car to be able to do? And that didn't quite happen.
If you go to a BMW dealership and buy an M, you expect it to be a sports car. Even if it's a big SUV, you still get the impression that you'll be driving a sports car. However, this is not a sports car. This is a boulevard cruiser. It's a car that accelerates nicely from the lights. However, you won't take it to the track for obvious reasons. This one doesn't even have ceramic brakes, not even as an option, not even as an option. So considering that it weighs almost 2.5 tons, it's very easy to overheat these brakes. On the other hand, even when you're driving faster through corners, you can feel that this car sits higher off the ground. This suspension works differently than when you're driving a car that sits low. So my expectations were that BMW promised me this would be a sports car, but this is not a sports car, it's a cool, fast car. Because here, officially, it's 3.9 seconds to 100. Interestingly, the previous model before the facelift did 3.8, but this hybrid and those extra 100 kilograms made it slower than the previous one. However, it's not really a sports car. I still wanted a bit more sportiness in this car after all. But in terms of practicality, I can't say anything bad because both in terms of how you feel driving this car, the materials inside, and just how quiet it is inside. Well, it's a luxury car, but it's not a sports car.
Speaking of the quiet inside, indeed, the silence is impressive and it's completely intentional. The only thing that gets inside here is the sound of the engine, which, interestingly, actually sounds better inside when you press the gas harder.
Yes, especially now that we're in quiet mode.
Yes, than outside. The car is rare, but the question is common. Does it make sense? And just like most internet users or even journalists who try to find the answer to this question, they do it more or less theoretically. I mean, if I had this car, I think it would make sense. Or if I drove this car for over a week, a journalist might say they know everything and will share their thoughts after just a week. But still, those 30,000 kilometers driven do a much better job of answering the question of whether this car makes sense. And if that sense exists, is it where we believe it is?
I mean, when it comes to whether this car makes sense, it's a cool car. I like this car. I like driving it. It gives me satisfaction the moment I get in, drive it, and look at it. However, a few times I've thought maybe I should swap this M for a regular X5 with air suspension because the suspension here is stiff. If someone doesn't like...
It's still better than in the X6.
Yes, that's true. However, it's still stiff. You're driving an SUV and you don't get that real sense of comfort, even here in comfort mode, just like we're driving now. Does it make sense? I like this car. I can't say if maybe I'm not as in love with it as I was with the M4. The M4 was the best car I've ever had, and I've driven the A45M and I've also driven...
Wow.
It.
All right, first the sound.
Like I said.
And second, this lightness. With some cars, I actually use this comparison, and this is exactly one of those SUVs that from the outside it looks like 2.5 tons of metal. It's 2.5 tons of metal, but when you sit behind the wheel and press the gas, it feels like the car is made out of plywood and cardboard and literally weighs 200 kilograms. Because the engine, it doesn't even look like it's under any real load. It just shoots the car forward without the slightest effort. That's also quite interesting because with many cars, especially American ones, those big SUVs that are over 5 meters long with a lot of weight and huge engines, very often it's the case that behind those engines there are correspondingly impressive numbers and so on. However, when you press the gas, you can feel that the power takes on that mass in stages, that everything takes time, that everything is stretched out, because accelerating those tons isn't easy. Here, the power versus weight struggle is reduced to almost nothing. It's a matter of revving up to higher RPMs, and right after you hit it, you basically stop feeling like it's a heavy car. So in this respect, you have to say whether it makes sense or not from any point of view, because it'll probably be different from each perspective. However, in terms of evaluating the dynamics and sporty tuning, this car makes a huge impression on me, and I've already driven a few cars.
So, you're judging it from the perspective that we're driving an SUV?
If I switched cars now, because that's also part of the problem with my job, I keep switching cars. And very often, the switch is from an AMG GT to, I don't know, a Renault 5, right? And at that moment, So if I switched cars the way you switched from the M4, then I had to learn to detach myself from what I was driving yesterday and focus on what I'm driving today. However, since you drove that M4 for a long, long time, switching to this car, despite its power, was definitely painful.
I mean, it's a slower car.
But the point is, it's different.
Completely different. This car is much more luxurious. I can't say it's comfortable because the suspension isn't super comfortable, but it's luxurious. So for example, you have massage seats, you have a heated armrest. When you touch it, it's heated on both sides. You can control this seat from that perspective. These are different things. It's a different car. So comparing this to the M4 is obviously wrong because these are two completely different cars. However, there are a few cool features here that just make you want to drive this car.
All right, I'll record for you how this car accelerates, from this perspective. So in M mode, a 0 to 100 run. The launch was really weak. That launch control would really come in handy because it would probably shave off half a second. Exactly.
Actually, I think you could try again. He didn't show that.
Let me tell you this, 0 to 100, 4.86. So for now, that's not a very impressive result with the brake. That definitely wasn't launch control, although the kick was already very clear and noticeable. And the result is 4.54. Here we also have the opportunity to do a moose test, which I will gladly do, but I have to say, I've had the chance to do it a few times already. And I was quickly pressing the gas to reach 50, and to my horror, I discovered we were going faster. Hitting 50 isn't easy. Once you press the gas, you're instantly in the stratosphere. 50? 50. All right, considering that the traction is poor, or even very poor, we'd have to go out and do this maneuver on a road that's been driven over and dried out like this. The only thing I can say is that the steering system, I feel like it requires quite a lot of turning. 12275. Well, it's not a disaster, but I feel like I turned as much as I could, maybe just a little bit at the end. I turned carefully. But it didn't bounce back very hard. And what did bounce back, of course, was a bit messed up by the tire. I mean on the surface, because the tire didn't really have anything to grip onto.
And it sounds better from the inside.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly it. In M1 mode, the road was going uphill. It wasn't a coincidence that I started it going uphill. You could already feel a bit that it had more work to do. However, I don't think it shifted into the lowest possible gear yet. It eased into it. So it wasn't super loud, but it was exactly that best rev range where it's high enough to sound cool, but still low enough so you still get that rumble. And that was the most pleasant part of the drive acoustically. All right, people keep coming in. With every turn, someone else arrives. I want to have an empty roundabout so I can exit and drive by myself. All right, one more turn, and if not, I'm done. Our axle test won't lead to anything. 52, 51. Exactly. He got in perfectly. Both to the left and to the right. Only when he got back to his lane, the rear gently followed with a slight oversteer effect that just appeared on its own and disappeared on its own, and nothing else. And that's in M1 mode.
Now it's the stiffest, yes.
Yes, he did it fantastically, but we won't praise him too much here because that's what we expected. I mean, who else but him?
Yes, that's exactly why this stiff suspension is there, so you can drive like this.
After 30,000 kilometers, do you drive this car differently than you did at the beginning?
I think so. I can definitely say one thing. Despite having so much power here, this car doesn't encourage fast driving. When you're driving on a German highway, you don't drive at 220 or 250 kilometers per hour all the time because this car simply doesn't encourage that kind of driving. You just drive at 170 kilometers per hour and the car just goes, that's it. And that's probably what disappointed me the most about it, that it's not a sports car. I'll say it again.
I understand, but that's exactly expectations versus reality. Exactly. But the question is, does this highway limit that you set for yourself come from reaching a certain speed where you no longer feel confident and safe, or is it like Clarkson? He said that every car has a speed at which it feels right, and after that it starts to feel a bit forced. I don't think that with this much power it has a point where it feels forced, because it has a lot of power. Enough. So I guess it's a matter of feeling safe.
A sense of security, you sit higher, you feel every gust of wind in this car because it makes a big difference. When you drive past those sound barriers, you feel those gusts. That's why there are very wide tires here, so if there are any ruts on the road, these tires won't fall into them. You just ride on the edges of the tires, and that also affects your sense of security. Also, when you're driving this car faster and there's a curve or a bend, it's not like you get that feeling of being super glued to the road, I don't know, maybe it's just because you're sitting higher up. Like, you notice the seat is high. You sit high in this car. There's no way to sit lower. And that definitely also affects the fact that you don't really want to drive this car faster. So I think, at least in my case, it's like, well, my hands get sweaty. When you drive faster, your hands really do get sweaty, and that sense of safety definitely isn't as high as in a lower car with similar power. I think if I were to sum it up, that if you want to have everything, you can have everything in life, but not all at once. And this car tries to give you everything, but unfortunately, for it to really work well, in my opinion, you really need two cars. A big SUV, maybe with a diesel engine under the hood, that lets you drive 1,000 kilometers on one tank, plus some kind of sports car like a GT. The last ones you tested, I saw on your channel. The last ones, I don't know when it'll premiere, but which ones did you test? Which ones? It's exactly for that, to give you that pure driving fun. This car gives you a bit of everything, and all in all, at the end of the day, like I said about the trunk, well, it's irrational. It's simply a car for no one because it's neither a family car nor a sports car. Well, it is luxurious, you have to admit that. But that's exactly why I wanted it. That's the thing, I wasn't looking for a lot of practicality or anything else. I just wanted an irrational car, one that's rare on the roads, and this car is exactly that.
You're very modest to say it gives a little of everything. It actually gives a lot. However, its attempt to combine opposites means that at some point he really does hit a wall. Yes. All right. Christian, thank you very much for coming here. I know that coming from Rzeszów to get here by 8:30, you probably had to set your alarms earlier. And thank you very much for presenting such a car.
I want to thank you for letting me show this car to a wider audience. If someone wants a car like this, at least now they have a bit more information about what it's like in everyday use. And I'm really glad. It was really nice to meet you in person because I've seen you many times on YouTube, and the best part of all this is hearing your voice because it's exactly the same as on YouTube, and it just blows my mind. So if you have an interesting car, this guy is the best person to tell you whether the car is really interesting or not.
There hasn't been an ending like this before. I'll extend the invitation now on behalf of the episode's guest. Well, I also want to thank you, my dear viewers, for watching this episode. Remember to subscribe and see you in the next videos. Bye.
Bye.